All right. Welcome to Phreology Friday. I am Aaron Tomlinson, and he is.
I am Derrick Day. Aaron, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, sir. How about yourself?
You know what? I'm doing pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah. So I tried your concoction, I think. Let me see if I got this right. Of lemon juice, fresh
Yep.
squeezed, um, turmeric,
I,
ginger,
yep.
cayenne pepper,
Yep.
apple cider vinegar,
Yep.
maple
Water.
syrup.
Oh, stevia.
Yeah, I put maple syrup in there.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, not bad. It kind of looks like I don't even want to say what comes to my mind. Uh, Chicken broth.
Oh, chicken broth. Okay. Well, that's better than what I was thinking.
Well, I was thinking UTIs.
Yeah. So I was thinking, like this has been dry January for me,
Mhm.
and I haven't drank. Well, let me rephrase that. I had a cheat day last Sunday because May and I had date night, and we went
Mhm.
to this place called Cut and Bourbon, so I had to have bourbon. And,
Sure.
so I had a bourbon, and it was okay. But one cheat day, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So today, I guess we're drinking the same thing. But I was thinking to myself, I said, I can't wait to try this with some bourbon or some vodka in
Oh, that actually is probably going to be really good. Bourbon would probably be really
it.
good.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So
Yeah.
tomorrow, I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know.
I will let you know tomorrow.
Yeah. So do you want to introduce our topic tonight?
I guess I can do that since this one I concocted. So America is built on this notion of competition.
Yeah.
Be first, be best, right?
Yeah.
And competition is everything. And it said that the whole basis of America was founded on competition. Competition against the British, and competition against the Native Americans, and competition between the North and the South, and competition. The early barons of the 19th century, the Andrew Carnegies and the
Yeah.
J.P. Morgans and the Cornelius Vanderbilts, all of these guys were competitors, right?
Yeah.
And what when I look back on this, I see missed opportunities, and I'm going to give you. I'm going to start off with an example, and I've got a bunch of these examples,
Hmm.
So, from the time the Wright brothers flew their first heavier than air aircraft, I think it was 1903, until the maybe the 60s, there were at least four major commercial aircraft manufacturers in this country. And eventually that consolidated down to two. And in 1999, it consolidated into one. And you could say that this is competition, that this was survival of the fittest, that a little bit of corporate Darwinism, if you will.
Hmm. Sure.
But in the late 60s, what was later to become the European Union, they kind of got together and said, okay, we had a thriving commercial aircraft industry, but now it's fading. And
Mhm.
it's fading. And at the time, it was fading against the big three of America, which were Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, and Boeing. And what the European Union did was something extraordinary. They got a bunch of companies together and said, we're stronger together than we are apart. And they created Airbus. Now, in the case of Airbus, it wasn't like mergers and acquisitions. It was like a consortium where everybody came together and they're essentially equal partners in this. And and in I think this was like in I think it was 2005, 2006. that Airbus took over Boeing as the number one commercial aircraft manufacturer in the world. Well, it could be said that the whole merger with McDonnell Douglas was a collaboration, but it really wasn't. It was, and I'm going to get to this later when the tail wags the dog.
Okay.
Because Boeing was ostensibly buying McDonnell Douglas, but the management of McDonnell Douglas wound up ruling the roost of the merged company. And what happened was anybody that's paid attention to any news in the last 4 years or so knows that Boeing has been enduring an ongoing shitstorm. The crashes of the 737 MAX in Ethiopia and Indonesia, and then with the door blowing off the Alaska Airlines, it's been, and then on top of that, Boeing space program, they finally get the Starliner off the ground, get astronauts up to the space station, and they say, oh shit, they can't come back in this thing. So what was supposed to be like a 3-week mission wound up being like a 6-month mission. And SpaceX had to come and bail them out. So I think about this and I say, okay, when you look at Europe, the European Union, again, they got together and said, something, we're stronger together than we are apart. And so they began to draft these articles of confederation and basically bringing all of these nation states together under common law, common currency, and common defense, right? And so you contrast that with the United States, and the two biggest economies in the United States are Texas and California. And these two are as polar opposite as they could be. As a matter of fact, I would even go so far as to say that Texas and California are in direct competition. And the proof of that is the number of tech firms that are leaving California to come to Texas because of, relaxed corporate laws, reduced taxes, and more lax labor laws and all of that. So I was thinking about this, and let me say one more thing that kind of got me into this, because I'm a big space nerd. I'm a space nerd. And as much as I can't stand Elon Musk, disclaimer, I love SpaceX and I love what they're doing. It's like when you watch their Falcon rockets, the boosters come back to Earth and land upright like a fucking Buck Rogers movie, that is exciting. If you're a space nerd, that is just, that's like the holy grail of rocketry, right?
Right.
Well, SpaceX had this head start. They first started putting satellites in space, and then they started sending cargo up to the space station, and then ultimately they started sending people into space. And now they've done commercial tourism where they put 3 space tourists in orbit, right? Which has never happened before. And so Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, has been kind of playing catch up until last week when they put the New Glenn spaceship into orbit. Now, to be fair, they still it wasn't a manned trip, and they tried to land the booster like SpaceX did, but it crashed. Okay, that happens. But the Falcon Heavy booster is said to be like the most powerful. Actually not the Falcon Heavy. Now it's the Starship first stage, most powerful rocket. But they said that the New Glenn is more powerful than the Falcon Heavy. Okay. So I'm looking at these guys, and it's like I'm trying to tame myself and be less vulgar, but let's just say it's a big appendage contest.
Okay.
Let's say that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I read an article by someone that's been in the space industry for some time with NASA, spent time with SpaceX, and now the guy's like retired. But he wrote this article and basically said, that SpaceX and Blue Origin ought to get together because they'd be stronger together, or they can leverage each other's strengths, and things like getting to the moon and getting to Mars, they could do it faster because there's a bigger brain trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that. I don't think that I don't think the space is something that can really be commercialized, or that it shouldn't be commercialized. Maybe it could be, but I don't think that it should be, because I think the impacts for humanity in a broader context is too great for it to be reduced to an oligopoly, right?
Yeah.
So this is what kind of got me all into this, because I was thinking about moments in my life and moments in business, and I have a shit ton of examples, and I'll go through these as we do the show. Business examples, sports examples, where some collaboration might have done better than competition or acquisition. Because a lot of times what happens with competition, you start getting this: if you can't beat them, join them, and if you can't join them, merge them, right? And I think that what's happening is that we're getting too many consolidations. Mergers and acquisitions is a big thing right now, and it's too much consolidation, and not enough. And again, I think the competition, when it's left to its end, results in monopoly or oligopoly. But if you say we're going to collaborate on some things, then maybe we can leverage both of our strengths and build on things, instead of tearing each other down or trying to absorb the other one. And I want to share one quick example, because you and I have a lot of different ideas on similar things.
Right.
But the one thing that I say, and I say this about our relationship all the time, is that our relationship is never competitive. Right. It's never one of us trying to assert their opinion over the other. We come together in a very collaborative way. And we say, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. And again, you've said a lot of things that have caused me to rethink a lot of things. And that's what collaboration does. So let's let Derrick and Aaron be an example of how collaboration can work in lieu of competition. And on that, I will kick it over to you, my brother.
Yeah, really good good intro there. A lot to think about. So the way I did the description was ask the question: do you work with people, or do you work against people?
Yep.
And that's kind of the difference, as far as I see it, to make it really simple.
Yep.
Am I working with you, or am I working against you? And while you were talking, I was thinking back on my own experiences. And one of the things that was always really fascinating to me was I would get together with pastor groups, and it didn't matter what it was. We're always part of a organization. I think we were part of 2 different organizations in the time that we were, doing the church and doing ministry, that we were collaborating with. And then there was other organizations like the local pastors group, I was part of a couple different local pastor groups and stuff like that. But the thing that was interesting to me was that there's all this talk about unity, right? If we can just come together in unity, and invariably it didn't matter how well-intentioned the people were, what their character was, invariably the thing would blow up or split apart, because there was quite literally competition to see who was going to lead the organization or whose ideas or even whose church was bigger. I finally got to where I would go to these pastors' conferences, and people would say, "How big's your church?" And I would answer by square footage instead of membership.
Yeah.
We had about 12,000 square feet, when I started doing that. And so I'm like, "Oh, we got about 12,000.
Yeah.
And they blink and, "Well, where's your church at? And what's your name?" Like, "How come I have never heard of you?" kind of thing, right? But it always amazed me that there was so much competition among pastors and in these pastors groups, almost like it's a race to see who could gobble up the most neighbors the fastest.
Yeah.
And so, it didn't take long to realize we're not really after the cause of Christ.
Nope.
And I realized something. I realized that if you're leading a church, particularly in the independent charismatic wing, it's probably totally different. In fact, I know it's different in certain denominations where pastors, go from church to church or whatever. I'm sure they have their own issues over who gets to be bishop or regional supervisor or superintendent, I think is what they called him in the Methodist Church. But I realized, and this is the way I said it back then, I said, we've got too much testosterone in the room. And by that, what I meant was, especially in that independent, charismatic, most of us had started our own churches. That takes a real type A personality.
Yep.
It just does. You can't do an effort like that and be successful if you don't have some really type A type of drives. And for people that don't know what that is, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Okay, everybody forgive me for saying this ahead of time. Think Donald Trump. I just mean, in charge, confident, leading the way, not afraid to voice your opinion, that kind of stuff. And getting too many of those guys together was just combustible every single time. And every single time, in every example that I can think of, things ended in competition rather than in collaboration.
Yep.
And it really is, I think, and I love that you started this by talking about competition is the American way. And I hadn't even really thought about this whole, America first mentality. I let go of the idea that America was the greatest country on the earth a while ago.
Yep.
Right? Just the numbers don't bear out. The math doesn't work, right?
Math ain't mathin'.
Math ain't mathin' at all. But that is definitely something that we are, as Americans, that we are raised with. It's a mythology that we are taught in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do develop a competitive mindset where we see the world. It's just what I would say. Not everybody does this, but I know I certainly did this. I'll speak for myself. Where we see the world through competition, survival of the fittest. You mentioned sort of a corporate Darwinism type of lens. And again, we're taught this in school, at least you and I were. I mean, with the awards assemblies that you have at the end of the year and, whatever, like always I didn't win, but, like they always give out a presidential fitness award or something. I was always good for that, but academically, I didn't apply myself very well until I got to college. But even in high school, you have a valedictorian. And as valedictorian, that's the guy that graduates at the top of his class. And I was embarrassingly competitive sometimes. I'll never forget being at a church retreat gathering or something with a bunch of other churches from Texas, no less. Most of them.
Yay, Texas.
Yeah. And we were just playing spades. You know, the card game Spades.
Yeah. Dude, I didn't know you played spades.
Oh, dude. I had to quit. I had to quit because I embarrassed myself. Because I had this other pastor, and
Dude, you really are black, by the way.
he and I were pastors, and I was going to wring his neck, and he was my partner.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, dude, that's not how you play spades. Like, if you understand the game, you can play with just about any partner because the strategy is going to be the same in every hand, right?
Yep.
And we almost went to blows, man. I mean, it was ridiculous, you know. And my wife was embarrassed. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was me and him on one team and Julie and his wife on the other team.
Ooh, that's the worst situation
against our wives, right? And that was an eye opener for me. That's when I realized, okay, Aaron, you got a problem here. And I really did. I mean, I consciously and with intention worked through this process of shifting my mindset, and I used these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Am I competing? Well, first off, when I was doing this, I was like, am I competing or cooperating?
Yeah.
But then I realized there's a vast difference between cooperation and collaboration. Give you an example.
Good one.
If your wife's an attorney.
Yep.
I'm quite sure however many times she's been in the courtroom, I think she does a lot of trial work, doesn't she? And
yep.
that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that the majority of people in that courtroom on both sides are cooperating with the judge.
Yeah.
And cooperating with the legal process, right?
Yeah, correct.
But they are definitely not collaborating.
Yeah, that's true.
Another example with you guys, right? Like, I was at your wedding. You both had a huge wedding party. You both had a lot of people standing with you as witnesses, and lots of guests there and lots of friends. And if your groomsman shows up, and I can't remember what exactly, the colors were and stuff like that. I can't remember. Probably because I had too much to drink the night before, but but if, let's just say, one of the bridesmaids came in a white dress, or one of the groomsmen came in blue jeans,
yeah,
they're not cooperating.
Yeah, that's correct.
So by going with the colors and getting the dress or getting the tuxedo or following the color scheme, I was there performing part of the ceremony. It was a privilege. I loved it. That's cooperation.
Yeah.
It's not collaboration, because we don't have to make your marriage work.
Right.
Only two people in that room on that day were really collaborating.
Right.
And that was you and Maya.
Yeah.
Working towards a common end and working towards a common goal, right?
Correct.
But I had to work through this entire paradigm shift of, am I competing or am I collaborating? And because it really changes how you view, because I think we do this competition thing without even realizing it.
Yeah.
With so much, especially as men. I don't know how the women do it. I know they got their own.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, ladies, but you all have your own weird way of relating to each other. I know, because I've worked almost my entire life, except when I was in ministry. Any job I've ever had was a feminine dominated world, crazy. And that's certainly the case now. And so I watch the different ways that competition plays out. But you almost view every person, every situation as a competition, because our self-esteem,
Mhm.
there's where I'm putting on the psychology hat,
Yep.
our self-esteem, which really comes to a large degree from our sense of honor in a community or our sense of shame.
Mm.
I'll give you one final example before I kick it back to you. One of the things that I get every year starting around March, because I work in a university, for people that don't know, I'm a counselor there. Invariably, I'm going to get an influx of seniors who are athletes who are graduating. And they're coming for counseling because they're having a sudden identity crisis. Because, especially to get to that level for most athletes, being a football player, being a lacrosse player, being a women's softball player, or a volleyball player, you pretty much started really young, middle school at the latest, and it's all you've ever known. And if you were good enough to get scholarships and get into college, we're not a Division I school, but I can imagine it's even worse for Division I athletes. You were probably the shit, especially if you were a guy in your high school, right?
Yeah.
There's a sense of honor that comes from that. And so one of the things that I figured out was a pattern with all of these individuals is not only do they not know who they are if they're not a football player, a softball player, a volleyball player, lacrosse player, not only do they not know who they are, to a large degree, their entire social currency is wrapped up in their sport.
Yep.
In other words, my friends played, people liked me, I was popular, all because I excelled in this sport.
Yep.
Not because I was good to people, not because I developed any kind of people skills, not because I had empathy or any of those things, but because I was good in this arena at the competition piece.
Yeah.
So it can become a way of seeing the world. Competition, here's what I'm trying to say, can become a way of seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when you shift to collaboration, it can take something. Like, this isn't just as simple as, okay, I'm going to start thinking about collaboration instead of competing.
Yeah.
Because it's so ingrained in us as Americans. It's ingrained in our culture. I mean, just the fact, and this last thing I'll say, Derrick, and I'll kick it back to you.
Keep going.
Just the fact that the culture got so upset, and it might be fun to, kick this around from both sides, at participation trophies. Oh my God, this generation is coming up. They're so weak. They're so mamby-pamby. They're so whatever. They all got participation trophies just for showing up. The fact that that is anathema to people,
yeah,
is indicative of this, I would almost call it social sickness that we have.
I think the social sickness is a really good way of putting it, because it really is pathological. It really is diseased. It's I don't know how to really describe it, but Smokey, get down. You're talking about participation trophies, and let me say this: I coach youth sports for years, and I've coached at several levels. I've coached like City League, which that's the home of the participation trophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I've coached competitive teams, like traveling teams, and then I've coached like AAU, right, which is that's like the big league of kids sports.
Right.
And each one of them has its benefits. Now you were talking about cooperation, right? So the thing is that cooperation, like at the AAU level, at the high level of competition, there is cooperation that says these are the rules. We're going to adhere to the rules. But every now and then you find somebody that wants to skirt the rules, right? So they're not cooperating, and they're certainly not collaborating, right? So and when I say collaborating, I remember one time, and this was in City League. Um, we had a team that we played against, and they only had 3 people show up. They had to have at least 4 to play. So we had a pretty deep bench because we had five starters and 6 on the bench, right? That was just kind of how the thing shook out. And this team had the requisite number of players. They just didn't show up that day. So I went to the coach and I said, hey, listen, how about if I let you borrow a couple of my guys? And the kids were like, oh, coach, I don't want to go. I want to play for those guys. I said, no, listen. I said, there's a powerful lesson here, because what you're doing is you're helping them continue to compete, because otherwise they'll have to forfeit and you guys will win the game by default. I said, do you want to win for doing nothing? And we're like, well, no, I mean, these are like 9-year-olds.
Right.
And so they went and played, and we still beat them.
Right.
But the thing was that there was a bit of cooperation and collaboration there that said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. But again, I think that like one of the things that like you look at insulin, the synthesization of insulin.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who synthesized insulin sold that patent for $1. Because he was like, this is so world changing, nobody should be getting rich off this. But somehow that patent fell into the hands of Eli Lilly and company. Now, this is not to say anything indicting about Eli Lilly, other than the fact that, well, when one group of people holds that kind of power, they develop price power.
Yeah.
And so the price of insulin, per dose, I think it's a week supply of insulin was is $400. And this is something that's very sensitive to me because I have a child that's a type 1 diabetic. Right. And for me, it's been okay because I always had good income, good insurance, and all of that. But what I'm saying is that if drug manufacturers said, okay, this patent is really essentially public domain now, or should be, how about we collaborate so that there's plenty of insulin out there that, that nobody has to go without. Nobody has to go bankrupt in order to get life-saving treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I talk about collaboration, why that's important. And let me say this, like there are a couple of things, like in the 70s, you had 2 mergers in sports. You had the merger of the ABA and the NBA, and the merger of the AFL with the NFL. And everybody said, well, this is for the good of the sport and all of that, right? And I don't think that it was, because it led to increased commercialization, which I think took away from the spirit of the sport.
Sure.
And so if the NFL had went to the AFL and said, look, guys, I know you're struggling. So how about this? How about we play X number of games against each other so the AFL can take advantage of the NFL's marketing strength. And this way, you develop a fan base within the NFL gets a fan base in the AFL, and we all work together. But we keep our separate entities, but we decide to collaborate so that we both survive, right? And that's, it was the same thing with the ABA and the NBA. But what was that movie that Will Ferrell was in where where he was playing for some team in Flint, Michigan? God dang it! It was a movie about the ABA. It was a comedy about the ABA merging with the NBA, and they were hoping that they were going to get an NBA franchise and they would become NBA players, and it didn't work out, right? And so it was loosely based on a true story. But again, the NBA could have bailed the ABA out. The ABA had a lot of things like, things that people don't realize, things like the 3-point line and the slam dunk contest. Those were ABA inventions. That the NBA later, either co-opted or, added into its repertoire. So, I think about this, and then I think in terms of government right now we are in the age of competitive ideology. It's not, people talk, okay, they say America first, but they don't really mean America first. They mean my ideology first, whatever my belief is first. And that goes even further. So you talked about churches. I was riding around in Tulsa, and Tulsa, like Dallas, is an interesting place because it's a Bible Belt, but it's like Tulsa is very special because like that's the home of Oral Roberts University and the home of Raymond Bible College, and so there's a lot going on there, and you will find like 2 mega churches literally right across the street from each other. Now, imagine what would happen. I mean, if the whole idea is to spread the gospel of Christ and to make disciples, imagine the synergies that if these 2 churches cooperated or collaborated and said, okay, instead of each of us doing our own thing, we're going to agree on a set of principles, and we're going to essentially become one body. And now we can use our money power, our community power, our strength in numbers to help bring some things to pass. But I want to say this about this. Like one of the things about competition, it's power. And they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is why people hated the New England Patriots for so many years, because it was just like a fait accompli that they were going to be in the playoffs and oftentimes in the Super Bowl. And so now we're in the era of the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is beginning to repeat itself, right? It's the Chiefs against whomever, right? And at the end of the day, how can I say this? Somehow you got to level the playing field. It's like you can't, some people love these dynasties, especially fans, right? You're a Broncos fan, and when the Broncos won back-to-back Super Bowls, that was exciting, and then I think they were in back-to-back Super Bowls under Peyton Manning, won one and lost one, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you get excited about that, but at the same time, you're like, okay, what if the Bills actually got to the Super Bowl? You start thinking about that, and you say, okay, how do I level the playing field? So I'm going to give one of my examples. There was in the Sports Car Club of America, is called the Trans Am Racing Series, right? And there was this driver he's a black dude, by the way. I think he was like most successful African American driver in American history. The guy's name is Willie Ribbs, and he was so dominant that they put ballast in his car, that he had to carry an extra 100 pounds in his car because he was so dominant. Hang on for a second. I don't know if Maya can get that, or if she's got it. Okay. I was thinking I might have to grab the door.
No worries.
So anyway, rather than the Sports Car Club of America, I think what they could have done is they could have said, okay, we'll come to some kind of formula in the car, so that the cars have equal, horsepower, equal handling characteristics, or something like that, so that things are fairly equal in the cars rather than penalizing one driver.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where one of those examples where they had an opportunity to collaborate and they failed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I've kind of gone around the horn on this, but the bottom line is, how do we create an atmosphere of collaboration instead of competition? And then we have to ask the question, where does competition make sense?
Right.
Because
Right.
you have to nuance this. You can't just say, ooh, collaboration good, competition bad. That's reductionist, right? And you don't want to get to that. You have to say, okay, how do we nuance this? Because there are some cases where competition is good.
Mm-hmm.
But so when we talk about like medicine, I don't think the competition in the medical field is good. I don't think the competition in space travel is good. I think the collaboration works well for both of those situations. But if competition reduces monopoly and or oligopoly, then I'm all for it. Mm-hmm. But when it causes it or creates it, that's when it becomes a problem. And so,
yeah, that's a great question. How do we create or foster collaboration versus competition? I'm reminded of a story. One of the advantages of the way because I can only speak for myself, so it's going to sound like this may sound incredibly arrogant to some people, and it's really not my intention or the spirit in which I'm saying this. But one of the things in Christianity that really worked for me was I genuinely believed that God had my back. Romans 8, if God be for you, who could be
against you?
Against you.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to outframe a lot of situations, to get out of the competition frame, because my faith in God was that I'm going to get mine. Because I think part of the problem here is we are just, because of evolution, if for no other reason, we are reward-based animals. We just are. That's why we have dopamine. That's why people get addicted to social media.
Yeah.
That's why people can get addicted to drama. You think, why in the hell would people just go cause trouble in every relationship and every situation? Because they get dopamine hits off of that. And dopamine is the body's natural reward system. I was reading something yesterday that wouldn't you know it, processed foods, of course they would. Processed foods tend to provide more of a dopamine hit than unprocessed foods. So for whatever reason, my brain is going to reward me. Dopamine, for people that don't know, is the feel-good chemical in the brain. It's what makes you feel good. If I eat a bag of Cheetos or a big bowl of macaroni and cheese,
big dopamine hit.
Yeah, I'm going to get a big dopamine hit. I'm also going to get garbage. I'm going to get a lot of excess carbohydrates and sugars and fats and the wrong kind of fat and all this stuff that my body can't use. Whereas if I sit there and just gobble down, and I know you love broccoli, I know you love raw broccoli, it's not a favorite of mine. It just isn't. I like cauliflower in small doses. I'm not a rabbit. I could never be a vegan.
I can be a vegan either, but I do love broccoli and cauliflower.
But sitting there, I figured out if I add Greek yogurt dressing, it's got about a third of the calories. It's healthier for you. And it tastes just the same as regular dressing, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting there eating a bag of broccoli and cauliflower, salt is another thing. Sodium is another thing that gives you a greater dopamine hit. So again, bag of Cheetos, bag of buttered popcorn, like the good stuff, the they used to serve in the movie theaters, not the crap you get today. You're getting more of a dopamine hit off of that stuff, even though it's really bad for you.
Yep.
So this reward system that we have functions with resources.
Mhm.
If I'm making more money, I have more opportunities, I have more power, I have more freedom. There's all kinds of benefits that come from making more money. So that's what I would call like a resource reward, right? There's social rewards that I kind of talked about, you know, having social currency or having honor and esteem among your
Mhm.
peers. That gives you huge dopamine hits.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then there's this internal reward system that we're just hardwired into. And so I think part of the challenge with getting people to collaborate is there has to be reward at the end of the day for everyone that's on the team. Cam Newton has been in the news lately. This may be a perfect example. Not picking on Cam Newton. It's a current event where he made a comment, I guess, on his podcast or something, that his MVP award meant more to him than a Super Bowl trophy would have meant to him. In other words, you know, the politically correct thing to say is, of course, I'd give up my MVP award to be a champion, to have, you know, a Super Bowl ring.
Yep.
And he mentioned quarterbacks like Brad Johnson and I don't know, probably Joe Flacco and Nick Foles. And I'm trying to think of guys that won Super Bowls that weren't
MVPs. Yeah.
At their position, much less MVPs, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you know, a lot of people lost their shit over that. But I think it speaks to this concept of reward, that it's just human nature. Like, he's just speaking human nature. I think people get pissed off because, well, of course, I'd rather have my personal reward.
Right.
I wouldn't exchange my personal reward for
a team reward.
Right. So I do think that the reward system, and then it plays out in our society as competition in a lot of these areas. So when we start talking about economics, for sure, you know, it's just interesting. The arguments for capitalism, which you and I both know very well because we were both very conservative.
Right.
And in fairness, you know, grew up in a world where we were competing with the Russians. We were competing with the communists, right? And certainly my impression after visiting communist countries, former communist countries, a decade later, and you're more world traveled than I am, but my impression was, yeah, capitalism is a better system because my life certainly financially is better in the US than it is, say, in Poland or the Ukraine or the parts of Russia that I was in or the Czech Republic, you know, the various different places, former communist areas that I had been to. And so it was easy for me to buy into the argument that capitalism was the superior system, right? Without all the nuances. It's a crappy thing. I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson, it was an advertisement for something, but he was saying that the real challenge with knowledge is when you know enough about a situation or a topic, you know enough about a topic, how do you say it? That you know what you know, but you don't know enough about a topic to know what you don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's an important nuance.
And that's definitely where I was at in terms of capitalism. You know, I have no words for man on the street interviews that I saw during the last election cycle. But anyway, setting that aside, I will kick it back to you and just, you know, I think that's the challenge. I think the reward system is a challenge. And so I think there does have to be enough reward for everyone who's collaborating.
Yeah.
If one person is just hogging it, I mean, I guarantee you, Cam Newton couldn't win that MVP award
Without his team.
The line was treating all of the linebackers like Von Miller in the Super Bowl and DeMarcus Ware. He didn't look like such an MVP in that Super Bowl against my Broncos. But anyway, just saying, like, that was a team effort, but he got the award. They didn't win the Super Bowl that year. Anyway.
So, like, I wonder about what who does it serve to have those kinds of awards? Because let me say this, that I think that if you're to bifurcate, for lack of a better word, competition and collaboration, it could be distilled down to 3 words: the greater good. What is the greater good? And so a couple of sports analogies, right? Going back to 2004 NBA championships, the Los Angeles Lakers had emptied the bank to get everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they not just Shaq and Kobe, they had Karl Malone, they had Gary Payton, they had Robert Horry, they had everybody. Basically, the Lakers broke the piggy bank and said, give us everybody. And the Lakers went through the NBA like a hot knife through butter in the regular season. No doubt about it, right? But then they met the who-dat Detroit Pistons. And I mean, listen, literally, it was like, what was the guy's name who was the captain of the Pistons at that time? Shit, I can't remember his name now.
No.
But anyway, this guy had been on 5 different teams in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And you had all of these people who were like, they were no names, and they beat the shit out of the Lakers, swept them, right? Here's what was found out later. It was always known that there was some friction between Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal, although it's funny that after Kobe's death, it was revealed that he and Shaq were actually pretty close friends, but they had this rivalry internally. And so this internal rivalry kept them from being the best that they could possibly be. And I'll go back to like the Dallas Cowboys, who I love to pick on, by the way. I absolutely love. I love to hate on the Cowboys. Love it, love it, love it. But you had Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield at the same time. Now, if you figured out how to play to each other's strengths, the Cowboys probably could have put together a winning playoff run and possibly have gone to a Super Bowl. But instead, what they did is they pit Pollard and Elliott against each other to the point where they're competing against each other, trying to run up each other's numbers rather than working toward the greater good. And the coaching, instead of saying, okay, guys, look, let's work together. We're gonna divide up the number of touches based on ability and so on and so forth. And instead, what you had press conferences after every game where each of these guys were saying, well, I just didn't get enough touches. I didn't get enough touches. Well, your competition internally impacted your ability to be competitive externally.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And so,
good illustration.
So a lot of times what we do is, I've seen this in churches. I'm going to pick on churches. I've seen this in churches, right? Where you got deacons, trustees, and associate ministers all vying for power.
Yeah.
And so instead of really working together to try to produce a more disciple producing ministry, a more community impacting ministry, there's chaos inside. And so even though they're big and beautiful on the outside, inside the infrastructure is crumbling.
Yeah.
The bridges are about to fall. The tunnels are about to collapse. The connectivity, the synergy within the organization is failing.
Yeah.
And this is another thing. This is why I think that instead of, churches all kind of collaborating, why there's competition in between them, because they can't resolve the conflicts within themselves. How can you? So, a good example, it's like you can't coach anybody on a life coaching paradigm if you yourself are dealing with financial difficulties, or if you are dealing with health difficulties. If you have challenges that you're not managing well, you can't go externally and tell anybody, hey, this is how you do it. Right. And I think that when we look at the current state of the United States and why we're failing in the global marketplace, because right now I read that there is not a single commercial generator that's made in the United States. Everything's made in China or Mexico and some in India, right? So this means that who uses these commercial generators? Banks, hospitals, essential services,
right?
And so now everything runs on software. They have this concept called the Internet of Things, and so basically every device has some kind of node or a small computer that connects to some network, a cellular network or wide area network or some other kind of network, satellite network. And these are how these things are controlled. So that means that strategically, if we were ever to be under attack, a foreign power could easily disrupt us by cutting off power to medical services, and then sending some malware into the generators. So they self-destruct or they don't operate, whatever, they're bricked, right? So we have become so competitive, and I was alluding to this earlier, like politically, and I won't even say politically, because let's face it, at the end of the day, there's really not a whole lot of difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in a macro sense. Now, micro sense, our personal ideologies, yes, it matters. And so we develop these rivalries. I want to I want to send these magtards back to the hillbilly farms where they came from, or I want to send these libtards back to Stanford or wherever they came from. And everybody's competitive. And everybody's on the seek and destroy mission when the greater good is failing. I mean, you have people who are voting against their self-interest. They're siding with billionaires at the expense of their own health care. They're siding with billionaires against their own basic services. It doesn't make any sense. But the thing is that when we look at our ability to be trading partners, to manufacture goods for export and things like that, in addition to being, because right now we are a gross importer. Honestly, the only major thing that we are an exporter of right now is commercial aircraft. We don't really export anything else, not in a major sense. In Europe, they're not buying American cars. They're not buying American cars in South America. They're not buying American cars in China. We live on an island. And if we're going to remedy that, like right now, China is chomping at the bit. There's this is another one of my analogies. There is a company in China called BYD, and it stands for Build Your Dreams loosely, but BYD. And they make electric cars. They make a lot of other cars too, but they make electric cars, and they have surpassed Tesla as the leading manufacturer of electric cars worldwide. You know how long it took them to do this?
I have no idea.
About 7 years. Tesla's been at this for like about 14 years now.
Wow.
And the thing about BYD is that BYD is not a single company, it's a consortium. These companies have got together and said, okay, we're going to share our technology, share our platforms, and so on and so forth, and we're going to produce produce better cars. And the auto magazines and reviewers, they do reviews of these cars, and they're like, this is like really ready for prime time. They could sell, if they sold these in the US, they would sell every one they made.
Mm-hmm.
And that scares the American auto industry shitless, because not only will they undercut American, Japanese, and European cars' prices, but their quality is just about as good. So, again, if you have some collaboration, and you see it in some cases, like Subaru and Toyota, they collaborated to produce an electric car. It's a shitty electric car by every metric that electric cars are judged by, but they did get together and they worked that out. Toyota and BMW got together to produce a sports car, the Supra, which is based on it's based on a BMW platform, but is built by Toyota in Japan. They take BMW parts, made them to the Toyota body, and boom, there you go. And it's a collaborative effort, and it's very good. Everybody, like any automotive enthusiast, likes the Supra, right? So there are these packets of goodness. Like right now, there's like General Motors has this Ultium technology for their batteries, and Honda is using that. The electric cars that Honda has are based on GM architecture. So there's a little bit of collaboration, and so some of these things work, but we're not a net exporter of this technology. I mean, we do it in pockets, but basically we're getting our asses handed to us, first by Japan, then by Korea, and now by China. Mm-hmm. And while we're sleeping, India is ramping up a pretty robust automobile industry. Mm-hmm. An Indian company, Tata, owns Jaguar and Range Rover, and they've recently announced that they're going to start building some Land Rovers in India. Big shift. And so again, if we're going to survive as a country, as an economic power, as a defensive powerhouse, we're going to have to learn some collaboration. We're going to have to learn how to play in the sandbox with others. And right now, as a country, we don't get it. We don't get it. We start off at a very low level. We start off at youth sports, and we say, okay, winning is everything. And then we get to school, and we say, okay, you got to get these grades. You gotta pass the SATs. You got to get into these schools. Everything is competitive. And then you get into the workforce, and it's competitive. And here's the thing: it's not competitive in a really friendly way. It's almost, it's cutthroat. People undermine, they lie on one another, they steal from one another, they undermine one another in the workplace and in schools and in academia and everywhere, right? Yeah. In business. We see that in another analogy, right? Volkswagen they were killing it with diesel cars. They were killing it. And this was what they were saying. This is the future of the automobile. That if the internal combustion is to survive, it's got to be clean diesels like Volkswagen. Except they weren't clean. Volkswagen was gaming the system. They cheated. Wow. And this has cost them like $25 billion with a B dollars in penalties globally because of this. right? Because they sold one thing and were producing something else. So again, let's say if Volkswagen had got with Stellantis, which is a company that used to be known as Fiat, and said, okay, let's collaborate on this because we're trying to save the planet. Let's make sure that we are really making clean diesels. And and so now, quiet as it's kept, this situation is coming up with Mercedes-Benz now.
Mm.
They're facing a similar issue that they may have gamed the system. To be, stay tuned to that channel. But again, if you start talking about, okay, how do we share technologies? How do we share distribution channels? How do we share? How do we collaborate? And I think, and that's another thing too. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to shut up because I'm really kind of rambling now. Like the whole NAFTA thing. NAFTA was supposed to be this open border thing between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. But it's really favored everybody except the United States. It's favored Mexico. Mexico makes cars and they bring them up here without import duties. Canada makes cars, they bring them to the U.S. without import duty. We're not really sending any product to any one of those. We're operating plants, right? But let's say that that the United States, Canada, and Mexico, they all get together and say, listen, we got this threat of the Chinese coming over here and really disrupting everything that we're doing. Why don't we get together and say, okay, let's build some collaborative platforms whereby we can take advantage of economies of scales. We could take advantage of supply chain economies and things like that, and really help each other out. The interesting thing about all this is that it's not rocket science. But in order to do this, we have to first address our competitive nature at the micro level and work it upward. Right? It has to be a bottom up approach. It can't be top down, and that's where I'll stop.
Yeah. I'm curious how we get there. I started to tell a story. I realized I started to tell a story and I didn't finish it. So I'm gonna come back.
Okay, finish the story
because it fits, and it was my own fault because I got off sidetracked on some other.
That happened with me a little earlier too, so don't feel bad.
But what I was saying was, my Christianity helped me because I was thinking of a specific situation where working one of my first jobs, as an adult after I was married, and I was working at a call center. I was just a customer service rep, and they needed to hire a new manager, supervisor, team supervisor, team lead, whatever you want to call him. And I applied for this position, and the person I didn't get it. They gave it to someone else. And without going into any details about it, I felt like that person got that position through nefarious means. Not to say that I would have gotten it. There was about 6 or 7 of us that had applied, but it was hard to feel good for the other person because we all knew it probably wasn't on the up and up, right?
Yep.
And I remember sitting there, and the Spirit told me, I want you to send this new supervisor an email sort of pledging your support. And so I wrote this email. I'm so glad you got this position. What, anything I can do to support you and help you and make you successful, the drill, right?
Yep.
And I'm crafting this email, this interoffice email that I'm getting ready to send. And I'll never forget this, Derrick, because whatever that voice is spoke up inside of me and said, now I want you to mean it.
But I don't want to.
Right. And so I changed my attitude. I did. And I served under that person and served that person to the best of my ability, collaborated to make our team the best we could be for a year. And then this person ended up quitting. And so there's another round of, applications and interviews and stuff like that. And I wasn't going to apply because I didn't want to suffer the rejection again. my 20-something self-esteem couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't apply. And I had a couple of the other team leads. There's 4 or 5 of us. A couple of the other team leads and the manager of the department come to me and say, how come you didn't apply? And I said, I made up some bullshit excuse. I didn't want to say because I don't want to be rejected again. And they said, well, you were like a close second in the last interview cycle. We'd really think you ought to apply again. And so I end up applying and I end up getting the position. My point is, I had a lot of resentment for that person when they got the position and I didn't get the position. Now, again, remember, I'm a very competitive person at the time, right?
Yep.
And so I was able to outframe the competition in that sense with the belief I will get my reward for doing this. It wasn't just that, oh, I'm so virtuous, Spirit said, now mean it. It was like, okay, I know I have to do this.
Yep.
Because if I don't do this, then God's not going to bless me, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Or I know if I obey, then there's a blessing, reward at the end.
Yeah.
And then I got into the whole reward system part of it. And I guess what's interesting to me is there's so many levels to this. You're talking on the major corporate level, major industry, not even just corporate level, but you're talking about an industry, the automobile industry or the space.
I'm gonna jump over here.
Yeah. You've been talking about the automobile industry or the space industry or the aircraft industry. So that's like really the macro level, or you talk about it from the national perspective of America, Canada, Mexico. These are really macro level concepts. And then there's the micro level that you also brought out when you're talking about, it starts in grade school. It starts in youth sports. I mean, I'll be honest. I kept my kids out of some youth sports because they're so toxic.
Yeah.
Like so toxic. Like I will never understand. And not that, Elijah for sure. I don't know about Josiah so much. Josiah's got some stuff that his coordination and stuff, but Elijah has very good body control. He's very fast. He's very quick. He's got a lot of athletic ability. So I'm quite confident. And in fact, any sport we put him in or whatever, he was going to excel at and at least do okay at. But I would go to these youth sporting events and just hear these parents just tearing into these kids, right? These adults tearing into these kids, coach, get that kid off the field, or why are you, because the parents are competing. It's got to be my kid out there that's, doing whatever. I'll never forget. I was at a high school. I was at my nephew's last high school football game, and they were killing the other team, like just absolutely destroying them. Like it was like 45-3 or some shit like that, or 45-6, something like that, right? And there's still a lot of time left in the game, and there was one mom that was sitting there, and you could just tell, like, she was vocal enough with the coach that she wanted her son to have an opportunity to play because he hadn't played all season. And so she's, yelling at the coach, let all the players play, like, I think she'd have been happy if her son had gotten in like Rudy, like the Rudy myth, by the way. For a special teams player or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the coach wouldn't put her in, and there were other parents that were hollering at her to shut up. and basically your kid's a scrub or whatever. I mean, the social dynamics of these things, right? So you're so right. It starts very, very, very young. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's such a complex issue because on the macro level, you're dealing with one thing. And then on the micro level, you're dealing with a totally different types of situations. When I'm talking about like not getting a promotion, well, there was reward attached to that promotion. There was more money
Yeah.
attached to that, right? And so most of us have difficulty thinking even on the macro level for
Yeah.
the most part. That's why we vote the way we do.
Yeah. Well, I think that it starts with micro. I mean, it's like I heard somebody say this once before. It's not original or unique to me, but it was that everybody wants to change the world, but no one wants to change themselves.
Yeah.
And so if we can, make effective changes in ourselves, right? How do we view competition? Do we view competition in a healthy way? Do we collaborate? What do we look for opportunities to collaborate, or are we so competitive that we're blinded to that? And so if we do these things, I think that it would change our attitude. So it's like you create a snowball effect or a domino effect. If I do better, then people around me will do better. And then if you start getting momentum, you get enough people doing better, then everybody gets better collectively. And I think that my only fear right now is that we're too far gone as a country to remediate that. I think that we're too entrenched in this uber competitive way of thinking that I don't know if there's a way to pull out of the tailspin.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, if we are going to change, if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to be able to effectively learn when to compete and when to collaborate, and both of which framed by those three words, the greater good. What is the greater good? Is this just helping me? Is it just helping my family, or is this helping my community? Is this helping my city? Is this helping my nation?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the questions that we have to ask. And the short answer is I don't really know how to do it. All I can say is that you and I have talked about this before. The introspection is a gift. I don't think everybody has it, but it can be cultivated, and it begins with the old adage, "To thine own self be true." You can lie to others, but you can't lie to yourself. And at some point, you have to say, okay, am I? Well, to use some common vernacular, am I the asshole? AITA.
Right. Yeah, I think I love that as a way to kind of bring things to a close here.
Yeah.
I think, like you talked about you and I and our relationship, and you invited me to collaborate with you 5 years ago.
Yep, be 5 years in June.
And we both do our own thing.
Yep.
On social media, but I don't get the same level of joy. I don't get the same dopamine hit, I guess. I don't get the same level of joy from my own personal efforts that I get or that I have gotten from collaborating with you.
I feel the exact same way.
And I can honestly say that whatever you choose to do, I want you to succeed. I want you to explode. I want you to excel and exceed. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And because I've thought about this, I've thought, well, what happens if, Derrick's YouTube channel suddenly blows up, or like your Facebook performance, for lack of a better word, it way outpaces mine. Like, uh, your reach and participation and all that stuff that you do with your Facebook posts and have done, at least in your former
Yeah. A former
iteration,
page. Yeah.
far surpassed mine. And I can honestly say there was never a day that I thought, damn, Derrick, like, what do I need to do to, uh, like, I wasn't jealous of your success.
Yeah.
I wasn't envious of your success. Never.
Yeah.
And if anything, this collaboration works both ways, just in general. I mean, it definitely works this way in our relationship, but just generally speaking, I know I could go to you and I have and said, hey, I don't know this technology piece or this social media piece very well. Here's some things that I'm thinking. What do you suggest? And you're happy to share what you've learned and what you know, and not get into areas where you don't know,
Yeah.
you know. But I think it's interesting to test our feelings and be really honest with ourselves. Compare yourself to people that are doing better. Compare yourself to people that have more. Compare yourself to people that are happier, better looking, whatever. And are you able to genuinely feel happiness for those people?
Yeah.
Or do you feel a sort of flame?
Yeah.
Or a resentment? I wonder how much resentment really is the byproduct of jealousy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place where we can gauge then if I'm feeling jealous, if I'm feeling aggravated. I have another friend, I won't say who, not the usual suspects for people out there that'll try to figure out who I'm talking about, has a huge, I mean, huge YouTube platform.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
And I've never felt jealous or envious. I've asked him for advice on various different things, various different stages about all kinds of different things, not just YouTube stuff, but parenting and different things that I know he does well.
Yeah.
And recently, with this last, a few months ago, he asked me if I would do an interview with him on a particular topic. And I want to say we talked for a good couple of hours, and it was great. And this was the second time he'd asked to interview me. But I knew when we were done, I was like, boy, if he posts that, he's going to murder his platform. But hey, whatever. And he contacted me later and he said, Aaron, he said, I've really thought about this. He said, that was a phenomenal interview. Absolutely loved it. But I know if I post this, it's going to be so controversial that it's going to cause me to, lose subscribers.
Yeah.
And his livelihood is entirely wrapped up in his content creation, as far as I know. I wasn't the least bit upset. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'll make sure to have you on for, something else. And I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. Like, I'm your friend, know? And again, maybe it sounds like I'm virtue signaling or being self-righteous here.
Nope.
That's really not my intention. My intention is to say, I'm the guy that started the show by saying I was going to go to blows with a pastor friend because my wife and his wife beat me at spades. And I had to process and I had to work through shit. And so I dunked on myself at the beginning. So I'm I guess I'm patting myself on the back here, but this is a personal thing to me because I had to work through that competitive edge, that competitive, really ugly side of myself, to come to a space where collaboration really is so much more meaningful to me than individual achievement. And so I had to start paying attention to my emotions. I had to start paying attention to my feelings. And I had to put really intentional and conscious effort into recognizing where I was thinking from a frame of competition and shift it into a frame of collaboration. So I hope I didn't sound like I was virtue signaling there. That
No,
really
not even.
My intention is because I think we will find more satisfaction, more joy, more sense of meaning, more fulfillment if we can deal with these issues and address these issues in our own personal life on the micro level.
Yep.
And make that shift.
I completely agree and can't add a thing further.
Right. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Yeah. Once again, I can't see the comments. And next time we do this, I'm not going to broadcast to my channel. I'll just, download the recording and upload it to YouTube. But I think that's why we're not seeing the comments in Restream. So it's like if you go to Facebook, and if I go to your page, and I can probably, it's going to get some feedback for a second. Boom, there we go. So it looks like Maya says she still has your best officiant mug here.
There was a lot going on for me during that weekend.
Yeah.
I was not at my best. That's all I could say.
Yeah. So Barbara Simons was on. She said, were the Olympics originally initiated to help mitigate the aggressive nature of men? I've heard that testosterone levels in men is dropping. There may be something to that, but I think that the testosterone in men isn't dropping because of our lack of, type A personality. I think it's diet. We're eating too much bad shit, and that is messing with testosterone.
Yeah, I've been going to the gym religiously since October, and I made a comment today to somebody. I think we're the only society ever in the history of the world that had to pay to go work because we do such little physical labor. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like in order to be active, we have to pay to go to a gym and of course that's going to boost your testosterone.
But think about this. It's like, you go to the gym, right? And who are you? Are you going to the gym? Is this a self-improvement thing? Or are you going like, hey, I'm trying to compete with somebody else? And you're really not competing with anybody else. You're really like your only competition really is yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
my competition was sudden death, but but yeah, no, I wouldn't go. And that's why a lot of people don't go to the gym. I mean, if I was ego lifting,
yeah,
shit, I would not be going to the gym.
It's like I don't like going to the gym because I'm kind of, I guess when it comes to working out, I'm kind of introspective. Like I'll work out with a friend,
Sure.
or I remember like back when I was in the Navy, I generally didn't work out when everybody else was working out. I'd go into the gym when nobody's in there, and I'd do my thing, get my workout in. And I've always been that way. Even when I was, when I was really in good shape, when I was really a specimen, I just, I'm not ego driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go in and I'd, do my thing. But it's like when I used to work out with my Navy SEAL buddy, it was just really just the two of us. Now, sometimes we'd have the family, like my kids would come and work out with us.
Yeah.
My workouts were never as effective as it was just me and him,
Sure.
or if I just, had to pick it up and do it myself. So,
Sure.
So I'm not a gym rat. But at the end of the day, what I realize is that the only competition that I have really for me is me.
Yeah.
I'm in a competition with myself to be in continuous improvement, to take the the Kaizen approach to living, constant improvement. But at the end of the day, what I'm learning is that collaboration wins more battles, and because I like winning, I'm trying to collaborate more.
Yeah, and I do, just to off of Barbara's comment. We didn't really get to the beneficial sides of competition, so I don't want people to misunderstand me either. I do think there are
there is healthy competition,
things that are beneficial about competition, and I do think that athletics gives us an opportunity to channel our devils in healthier and constructive ways. It's not our better angels always, but
yep. But anyway, another good topic. And I think we may have to circle around and do the healthy aspects of competition, just to do equal time, because I don't think that we really shit on competition today, but I think that there's something to be said for healthy competition, because sometimes it helps if you have someone pushing you, but it's as long as everybody's cooperating, like you said. If there's cooperation as far as the rules, the nature of the competition and all of that, then that competition can be very healthy.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed. All right, bro. Love you. And everybody out there watching, appreciate you. Thank you for hanging in there with us.
Love you guys.
And I'm going to let you close.
Thanks for growing in real time with us. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Happy February to everybody. Remember, it's Black History Month, so get some damn Black History next month. And to use a Black vernacular, peace and hair grease.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.